Hello everybody. This is a follow-up video to normalization. This is the second example that I'm going to present to you on this topic. And as you can see from this example, it should look very similar to what you saw in the first video. And in fact, it's the exact same relation. All I did was I switched around the team name and rank and put them at the beginning as opposed to having them at the end. We should get the exact same result as what we got before. The only difference is I rearranged the fields so that you could see the repeating group. And that shows you how you can get to the same result whether you detect the repeating groups up front or not. So if you look at the data, and I just put some sample data out here for you to check out, you'll notice that you've got one team here, the Grand Rapids Griffins, and they're ranked 8, and they have there's 6 players here showing up on the team. And notice each player has a name, an age, and a position on the team, and they're all on the same team, so the name and the rank are identical. So this is an example of a repeating group in the sense that what's repeating, if you had one row, if you just took all 6 of these and made them into one row, then you would only have Grand Rapids Griffins and rank 8 there once. And you would take the first 3 attributes, and then you'd stick 3 more columns next to them, and 3 more next to them, and 3 more next to them. And you do that 6 times. But your repeating group is the player, age, and position. Those 3 fields are part of the group that repeats. So for any one team, the player, age, and position are repeating. And if you have 6 players on the team, then the group will repeat itself 6 times. So that is another illustration of a repeating group. So as we get into this example and work through it, we'll start out on this one identifying that repeating group and dealing with it. So what I did is I put the normalization flowchart, or I called it normalization checklist, in Lucidchart so that it would be easier to see it as we go. And then I put the initial relation here in this blue-green color here, as you can see. So that's our starting point. And then the test for first normal form is here, as you can see it. And so that is where we're at, and that's where we'll start here. Okay, so let's look at this process and start out here. Step number 1, no repeating groups. And we already established the fact that the last 3 fields are a repeating group. So follow the steps below. A, remove the repeating fields from the original relation and create a new one with them. So what I'm going to do is duplicate this. And it says to create a new relation with the repeating fields. So we'll go player, age, and position. Now, obviously this new relation is going to describe a player. So I'm just going to name it that. It says in step B to assign a primary key to the new relation. Obviously that's going to be the first field because every player has a unique name, or at least we're going to assume that at the beginning here. We know actually that shouldn't necessarily be true, so we'll make that fix in a minute. And then it says to assign a primary key to the original relation, which means I have to take the 3 attributes that I moved out and get rid of them, leaving me with name and rank. And we will set the team name initially here as our primary key. So in step D here, it says to assign the primary key fields you chose in step C to the new relation, so that's our team name, and combine them with the existing primary key defined in step B, which is the player. So basically what it's telling us here is to take the name of the team, which I'm going to call the team name here just to distinguish. In fact, what I'll do here is I'll call this first field player name, and then we have our team name, and I'm going to underline both because it's telling me to put both together as a composite primary key for this second relation. So that's step D. we've added the primary key field we chose in step C, which was the primary key of the original relation, which is name, or I'm calling it team name now. So I'll make that same change up here. Okay, so we're putting the primary key of this table down in the second one, and we're making these two together a composite primary key. And then it says to, in step E, take that team name field and make it a foreign key. So I'm going to take this and italicize it. So now we have completed step 1. We've taken care of the repeating group at this point. So now we're ready to start and looking at step number 2. Now, one of the things I'm going to do right off the bat here, and I have this mentioned down in the final checklist, but the sooner you do this, the better, and that is to rename some things here and break some things apart, right? We're looking here at step number 2, make sure all fields are divided up as much as possible. So let's take a look at team name. Now, team name is a string, and we've said before that the ideal primary key is numeric and would never be subject to change. The team name, while it's not likely to change, it certainly could. So what I'm going to do is make a surrogate primary key here. I'm going to call that team ID and make that my primary key instead of team name. So I'll make that change. And since I've done that here, I need to go down to the relation below where there's a foreign key, and I need to update that as well. Okay. Then when I look at the rank here, all of the other fields start with the prefix team, so I'm going to put that prefix here as well. Now for player, I'm going to do the same thing. The name, as we've talked about many times in the past, can be broken up into first and last name, but I also want to create a surrogate key for this relation. So I've got player ID, and then I'm going to break up the name here into the last name, and I think what I'll do, I'll just go L name, F name, and so player ID will be my primary key field, and then I have team over here. Now, age is an attribute for the player, so I'm going to put that over here. And then, actually, position is as well, so what I'll do is I'll just put position out. What I'll just do is I'll put your player position, and then we'll put team ID at the end there. Now, so everything is broken up to be atomic as possible. Now it says in step 3, remove any calculated attributes. Now, the age actually is a calculated attribute. We talked about this in the first example in the previous video, and mentioned that the age is a bad thing to store because we don't know the player's birth date, and when that happens, the age goes up another year. So that variable, or that value, I should say, is not fixed. It's changeable, and we don't really want to have to update that thing ourselves. And so the better choice here is to change it from age to date of birth. So I'll make that change. Okay, and so now everything looks to be named correctly, and everything is broken up as atomically as possible. Now it says here, if a subset of attributes describes an entity that's different, so we don't really have the case of a subset of attributes defining a different entity. That would be something that we would have seen in the first example we did, where we didn't define the repeating group, and we found it essentially on the other side of the relation, and we grouped the attributes together as belonging to a team, but then we pulled them out later. So in this case, we don't have that issue. It says make sure the relations have a primary key. So obviously we've got the team ID is unique for the team table, the player ID and team ID combined together are the primary key, which is something that we can do for now. Set it up this way for now, because the instructions told us to do this. So we have our primary keys for both tables. So now it says to create a dependency diagram of the relations. So let's start doing that. So to start with, let's begin with the team here. So I'm going to take a box and bring it in, and I'm going to make this box a little bit decrease the height of this box, and I'm going to call this team ID, and I'm going to take this and I'm going to colorize it. Let's make this orange here. Then I'm going to duplicate this and stick it right next to the other one. I can highlight them both, duplicate them again. And actually for this first table, I only need 3, so I'll get rid of the 4th one there. So we have team ID, and we have team name, and team rank. Now, the dependency diagram, for an explanation of how to walk through the attributes to come up with a dependency diagram, to check back on the first video, but basically for this it's very, very simple. It's a simple matter of the primary key field determining the other two. And while I'm here, I'm going to colorize the first. We'll make this red because it's a primary key field. Let's see. The other thing I think I'm going to do, I like the font that I chose up in these table descriptors because you can see the underline and underscore. They're distinct, and I like that. So I'm going to use what font that I have here. Okay, I'm trying to remember what I used here. Well, let me go back up here. Liberation Mono. Okay, so I'm going to highlight these, go up here to the font, and select Liberation Mono. That's a nice choice for a font. If you're using Lucidchart, that gives you the ability to underline things and use the underscore. And as you can see, it doesn't blend the underscore and the underline together, which I think is kind of nice. So we have our first relation set up with our dependency diagram. Let's move on to the next one. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this whole thing and duplicate it. And then I'm going to delete. I don't know why. I really probably shouldn't delete these, but we'll just do that. Delete, and then we'll start building the next one. So we've got player ID. I'm going to move team ID next to player ID because usually when we set up a primary key field, it's nice if you can keep your primary key fields together in a group so that when you draw lines going out to all the other boxes, it just makes the diagram a little bit easier to interpret, or to interpret and to build. So, okay. So I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 fields. So I've got my 6 fields here. So I've got player ID and team ID. So now I need player L name, player F name, player DOB, and player position. Last one, I need to make him just a little bit longer, okay? Good. So the first thing I'm going to do here is take care of my primary key dependencies. Now, this is always the case when you have a composite primary key, or any primary key for that matter, that the two combined together will point at all of the other boxes. Now, what I've found for this here, to make this work better for connecting things together, is I can put a small circle in here and use that as my connecting point. And if I delete the text inside of the circle, it's difficult to get this thing centered, but what's nice about it is that it enables me to have a connection point for my subsequent lines when I set this this key up and do all the lines that go to the other fields. Takes a little bit of horsing around with the lines, but it comes out pretty well. So you always do this for your primary key fields every single time. Now, if I just look at player ID and I ask the question, if the player ID were to be duplicated, what else am I guaranteed to also duplicate? So if I saw player 10 twice, would I always get the same team ID? I would, because the player is always on the same team. If I duplicate the player ID, will I always get the same player last name? Yes, I would, because it's the same player. In fact, all the way across, you'll find that player ID determines everything else. But then you'll also notice that the team ID doesn't determine anything else in this table. In other words, if I see the same two teams, am I guaranteed to get the same of any other value? And I'm not. Now, we found that I really don't need the team ID to make a given record unique, that the player ID is sufficient as a primary key. I forgot to make this a foreign key here also. I need to do that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to drop this attribute out as a primary key attribute. It does not need to be a composite primary key. So I'm going to put it back to being a standard field. And if I do that, I'm not going to need anything that I built up top. So at this point, essentially, I have a complete set of relations, both of which are now in second normal form. How do I know that? Because both tables have only one primary key attribute. If you look at the test for second normal form, the relation must be in first normal form. And secondly, the primary key, if it's a single attribute, the relation is automatically in 2NF and you need to go no further. Now, if I look down at the third normal form test, are there any transitive dependencies? Well, if you look here at these there are no transitive dependencies anywhere. They're all full dependencies. So at this point, my relation is complete for both. Both are complete. So all I have to do at this point is finalize things, and all I really need to do here is make a couple simple changes to my written descriptors. Basically, all I have to do is set my foreign key up and make it not be a primary key. So at this point, I have my two relations set up here. As you can see, I'm going to take these and I'm going to copy them, and I'm going to come down to the bottom and look at my final checklist here. Every table has a name. There are no partial or transitive dependencies. Everything has a primary key. Each attribute is named properly. So at this point, I'm good with this relation. These two relations are good to go, and I'm complete. So really, by finding that repeating group early on, I actually made life a little easier in terms of getting this through to the complete final solution here. So that's it. I'm good to go. This example's finished, and I'll wrap up this video. Again, thanks for watching, and I'll create another video with another example here for you guys next.